Hello and welcome to the 2013 Foster Club Outstanding Young Leaders webinar that we're about ready to start. And um, my name is Ryan Sheely. I am the Director of Communications here at Foster Club, highly involved in the 100 Outstanding Young Leaders campaign. And I'll just give you a brief little overview of what we're going to do here in the agenda. Starting at the top, we're going to talk about webinar tools. And then we're going to go to the introduction of Foster Club. Brief little introduction at that point before we move on to about the Outstanding Young Leader Award, strategic sharing, how Foster Club can support your advocacy and volunteer work, and then a Q&A session at the end so everybody can have all their questions answered, and we can move forward from there. And right now I'm going to hand this off to Celeste, and she is going to be going over the GoToWebinar tools.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Some of the tools we want, for those of you that are not familiar with using GoToWebinar, we want to make sure you know how to use the tools that are available to you. Everybody's dashboard looks a little bit different, but it looks something like what you see on the screen. You will notice that there is a pop in and pop out button or arrow that's part of the toolbar up at the top. And if you open that and close that, it will collapse and expand the pane that lets you interact with us. Right now, we have everybody on mute to avoid feedback during the webinar, but we will open up microphones at the end during the question and answer session. During the webinar, if you have questions, there's a questions panel that you can expand, and you can type a question directly into that panel. If you want to go ahead, I see Kashan already typed a question that said hello. If everybody wants to give that a shot and just type a hello message, and that way we can see that you are hearing us. Oh, great. You guys follow instructions well. Thanks. Now, at any point during the webinar, feel free to type your questions. That way we can collect questions as we go along that we'll discuss at the end of the webinar. So I want to sort of kick off this webinar with first a big shout out and some congratulations to the 100 young people that were selected as Outstanding Young Leaders of 2013. We have on the line today some of our Outstanding Young Leaders. We also have some supportive adults and some nominators in the webinar. So thank you for joining us, supportive adults. I just wanted to give make a brief note of congratulations to you that were selected as Outstanding Young Leaders. The way that we see this award is that each of you who were selected are a select group of young people who are thriving despite some difficult circumstances in childhood and despite the fact of having to go through foster care. So first of all, you deserve congratulations for doing well for yourselves this far. But I think the part that really turns each of your stories into a hero story is the fact that you are giving back to improve the system. And we're very proud of that at Foster Club. So we're proud to be able to recognize each of the 100 Outstanding Young Leaders. This is the first year of holding a webinar for our 100 Outstanding Young Leaders. So we'll be excited to hear your feedback. We really want to work to connect you to Foster Club, the organization, but also to connect you to each other and to other young leaders across the country who are part of a movement to improve the foster care system. I'm going to hand it over now to Ryan, who is going to introduce you to some of the Foster Club staff.
This is Ryan Sheely, Director of Communications again, and full list of staff here. We have Michelle Trott, aka Mama Trott, that works in our Oregon outreach. And then next in line, that's my mug right there under the communications. There's Crystal Weston, who does a lot of our partnerships, outreach, donors, resource development. And Natasha Santos, she is working on the It's Complicated campaign primarily, but she's also heavily involved with the Oregon Teen Conference, other conferences, and just really helping out everywhere she can. And then there's Rusty Johnson. He is our man down in Southern California, Long Beach to be specific, and he is He's a recent hire, and he is working on a lot of outreach for education and other issues that are specific to youth and care for California youth. And then there's Timothy Bell with our policy and training. Tim does a lot of work on a lot of national policy type of issues, going to Washington, D.C., and also a lot of our curriculum development. So that's what Tim's up to. And there's Christia Hall. She keeps all the gears moving here internally at Foster Club headquarters. And then Ashley French also works with the Oregon Outreach along with Michelle Trott. And then our executive director and founder, Celeste Bodner, there at the bottom right. And so now we're this first slide here. It's built for youth, powered by youth, change the life of foster care. This is just the this is Foster Club. We started. It was about the year 2000, and Celeste tells the story much better than I do, and I have a video of her presenting this that I will put online, and so we can show you guys relatively soon. But we started off basically because there were no resources available to youth in care. As a foster parent, you're definitely required to go through some training and be accredited and jump through some hoops for each state that you live in. But the youth themselves were given nothing, no tools, no information. And that there was obviously a real void there that needed to be filled. So Celeste and her sister started Foster Club pretty much in the kitchen and built a website. And that's what everybody sees today is the website. That's our main source for people to find us is online. That has led us to have programs such as the All-Star program and the 100 Outstanding Young Leaders that we're primarily talking about today. And we are just highly engaged with youth currently in care as well as alumni. And those conversations that we have with youth really allow us to help develop policies and make good recommendations to policymakers because we're getting our information directly from the people who are affected. So that's kind of the brief rundown of Foster Club. We are constantly growing every year. There are more and more requests from us as far as what we're going to do the following year. The All-Star program continues to grow, and the Outstanding Young Leaders campaign grows by leaps and bounds every year. And this is probably the biggest deal we've made of the 100 Outstanding Young Leaders. This year, we're really trying to push for having everybody connected. Natasha's going to talk more about this later, about the Facebook pages and things like that. But before Natasha goes, I'm going to hand it off to Crystal, who is going to talk about the Outstanding Young Leader Award and the history. And Crystal, in our other room over there, hopefully her microphone should be on now. We should be able to hear you, Crystal.
Hi, everyone. Nice to have everyone gathered here today, and we're really excited about this wonderful group of people that have received the award. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about the history of the award. Back when Foster Club had first started, one of the first programs that were done that happened through Foster Club was putting on conferences for young people and just meeting some of these young people and seeing how incredible they were and the stories they had to tell and the great work that they were doing in their own states and communities. The people at Foster Club at that time were just so amazed by all these young people, and we do have a small internship program called the All-Stars program, but it was just not there were so many more wonderful people than were able to participate, and so through some of these other programs, we became aware of all these young people, and we wanted to be able to recognize the contributions they were making across the country and start getting them kind of more networked together and call out the great things everyone was doing to be able to help spotlight some of that good work. And another reason behind the creation of this award was like if you Google foster care, you don't always get a good response. And so part of the idea is to address some of the stigma. Like sometimes people are not aware of I mean, no one's at fault for going into foster care. It's outside people's control, but there's still sometimes a stigma or like a lack of like just kind of an ignorance about what youth and care are all about and what wonderful young people they are. And so the idea behind this award is also to illuminate the spirit of service and success of the young people in care that we work with every day. And then we also want to help tell those stories and raise public awareness about some of the things young people in care face. And then finally, we want to recognize how young leaders are empowered to improve the child welfare system themselves through their own actions and for their peers and young people coming up through the system behind them, and continue to make those contributions even after. So basically, going forward and giving back instead of kind of giving up on the situation. So thank you everyone for these contributions. And if everyone would want to get everyone a little bit involved here. So how were you all supported by people in your lives to help you be so successful? And if you all want to type a quick answer in the comment box, we're really interested in some of the supports people had to kind of help them through on their journey. So go ahead and work on that, and thank you so much for your responses. And then we also want to talk a little bit about the selection process. It was a really difficult process. We started out by recruiting young people from across the country. We had a lot of youth organizations involved and independent living programs, and we ended up with a huge response of young leaders who nominated themselves or were nominated by others, and we had each of those applications scored by 2 different individuals, and we considered the geography somewhat of where people were located. We tried to get a good representation of what people were doing from across the whole country, and where there was quite the process. And then at the end, we actually had we have a day-long event where all the staff at Foster Club looks through the final applications, and we discuss what makes each individual so special and what really stood out as an incredible story or an incredible achievement. And so then we kind of go back and forth, and that is why we're so pleased with our final group. So, and to help recognize these efforts, we have a number of ways that we help spread those stories. So, so we go through the biographies that are submitted as part of the application, and then we also work with youth to help flesh out their story a little bit more, and then we turn that and discuss their achievements into a press release, and we have a staff member assigned to each young person, and then that person creates that story and that press release, and then goes out to media outlets, including newspapers, also organizations, online entities, and other outlets in your community and your state. And we really want to spread news of the great work that you all are doing every day. So, and you may be called upon. Some of these news outlets get really excited wanting to do interviews and whatnot, or an organization might be interested in more information. So you may be called on for additional comments. And so one reason we wanted to have this webinar today is to make sure that, I know some of you have already spoken with the press before and told your story, but we want to help prepare you for telling your story and make sure you're comfortable with the process. So, but before we delve into that, we're also interested if there's some kind of media outlet, a social media page, or some organization you might already work with or know or you'd like to work with that you want us to reach out to when we announce your award. So feel free to type those in and we'll be following up. And we're also really excited, you all that are attending today, we're really excited about doing your press releases and reaching out to the media and helping to tell your stories right away. So you'll be some of the first people going through this process for 2013. And so I do want to turn it over to Timothy Bell. He's going to be discussing strategic sharing, and he's our training and policy coordinator here at Foster Club. And I'll turn it over to Tim. Thanks so much.
Hello, hello everyone. My name is Timothy Bell. Just like Crystal said, it is a pleasure to have you all on board, and I'm looking forward to, as the person that does a lot of the training here at Foster Club, I'm looking forward to working with a lot of you in the future. So please, if you have any questions, you should, of course, feel free to contact anyone here at Foster Club. But I'm very eager to get to know each and every one of you. So thank you for being on the line, and for the adult supporters who are on the line, thank you very much for supporting the young people in your states and areas. It is very much appreciated, not only by Foster Club, but also by the people, young people that you're working with. So with that said, what I'm going to be talking with you about is strategic sharing. So upon first glance, it seems like it could be pretty obvious, right? Like, I'm going to share strategically. Like, no duh, that's what it is. Well, I'm here to tell you that there's sort of a lot to unpack in those two words. So it's just two words, but like I said, there's a lot to unpack. So strategic sharing is about sharing your story, and so I thought I'd take it from the ground up with the first question, which is, what's a story? So story is any communicating that you do about something that happened to you or that you did. It can range from that super fun adventure that you had trying to get to Taco Bell before they closed, to telling people that you grew up in the foster care system. By the way, I wanted to mention that telling a story is not all about the words that come out of your mouth or that you write down on paper. The place that you tell a story, the tone of your voice when you tell that story, the clothes that you have on when you're wearing, the clothes that you have on when you're telling that story, all that stuff, that all counts as you telling the story. That's all part of it. But we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a few minutes. But I wanted to mention, of course, that what we're here to talk about today is the parts of your story involving foster care. So the first question I thought you might have is, well, why does my story matter, or why would it matter that I share it with other people? So I have, why does it matter? And a couple of sub-questions there. Well, who would want to know my story? Family, friends, people you meet just randomly on the street and on the bus, reporters, government officials, all those people, even your closest friends are going to want to know something about you that you may or may not be prepared to talk about. And so what strategic sharing is and what it does is it sort of gets you to game plan that in advance. So whether you're telling a story to change people's minds, whether you're telling a story to change some laws, whether you're trying to tell a story to change yourself, all of that storytelling, at least in the way that we're talking about it today, it's all about making change. That's what it's all about. It's all about making change. So the real power behind a story is that they change the way that people think about you, and they change the way that people think about the world. this sounds great, right? This sounds great. Like I'm going to use my story, and it's gonna, uh, it's gonna change the world. It's gonna, change laws for all young people in foster care. That sounds marvelous. However, a story really is just a tool, and just like any tool, people will use it, people will abuse it, they will do good things with it, and they will do bad things with it. And so the answer to the question, why would I share my story, it becomes really clear when you look at the following slide. So I challenge you, and I think Crystal talked a little bit about this earlier, or at least mentioned it. I challenge you to, just like I've written here, type into Google after we're done with the presentation, of course. Type into Google, what is foster care? Just type that phrase, and see what comes up. And I'll save you some effort by pasting it here. You can look this up. Feel free to double check me. This is the first thing that comes up when you type in what is foster care. So foster care, supervised care for delinquent or neglected children, usually in an institution or a substitute home. That's the first thing that's the very first thing that comes up. Not even, you don't even have to click on a website to go to that. That's the first thing that pops up on Google when you type in what is foster care. I'm personally offended by that. A little bit side note about me is I grew up in the foster care system myself, from 12 to 18 in the state of Washington, and that definition that violates my understanding of what foster care was. It was so much more than that, and I mean, yeah, I wasn't put into foster care because I did something. I wasn't a delinquent. I was put into foster care for circumstances that were way beyond my control. So this is what happens if we don't give people good stories about us. They just start inventing stories of their own to help themselves understand the world. Once that starts happening, this is what you get. You get foster care as a supervised care for delinquents. That's what you get if you don't put a shine on what people know about foster care. So with that said, if that definition does make you mad, like it does make me mad, then I encourage you to replace that definition in people's minds with your stories. I encourage you to speak so loudly and present yourself so positively that no one would even think to Google foster care, because the successes that you have are really the first thing that pops in their mind when they think about foster care. And Chimamanda Adichie, she puts it best in her TED Talk, which if you have not seen, I suggest you do. The danger of a single story. She says, the single story creates stereotypes. And the problem with stereotypes is not that they are untrue, but that they are incomplete. They make one story become the only story. So if people have only heard that one story about delinquent foster youth, then they have a vision in their minds about all foster youth. So I challenge you again, it's on us, those who are doing great things with our lives, to let people know how great foster youth can be. But doing that can be much more tricky than you might think, and this gets us back to strategic sharing. So what is strategic sharing? The first thing it is it's safe. Okay, so it is safe, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. The second thing that it is it is smart. You are doing it strategically. It is like you are playing a game of chess with words, and you got to be brilliant about it, and you have to play it safe. All right, so the way to think about strategic sharing, or my favorite way to think about it anyway, is like a stoplight. So green means go. Yellow means you better slow down, or you better show some caution, because the light is about to turn red, which means red is stop. Stop what you're doing. Don't cross the line. Do not proceed. You are stopped. All right. So this is sort of like the this is sort of like strategic sharing. So strategic sharing isn't all black and white, right and wrong, like with many strategies. Like there are many ways to win at the game of chess, and just like that, there are many ways to share a story well. So there are a lot of variables to think about, including your audience, your emotions, just to name a few things. We're going to give you a few example statements, and if you all would type into the little box, your little question box, what you think a statement is, whether it is a green, yellow, or red light. We'll have a little bit of a discussion based on that. So the first statement for you all is, I have a foster sister. I have a foster sister. So is that a green light, yellow light, or red light statement? Greens, yellows, greens. So mostly yellows and greens. A few of you selected color choices that were not on the scale. I challenge you to get your eyes checked. You may be colorblind. In any case, I will give you Foster Club's thinking on this. But again, our thinking is not, like I said, this isn't black or white, right or wrong. This is sort of whatever position you as a young person are in at the moment. That's sort of what will dictate whether this is a red, yellow, or green. So generally speaking, I have a foster sister is a green light if and only if you're willing and able to make the claim that you are from that you had some involvement in foster care. So if you've been able to reconcile that fact about yourself in life and you're willing to talk a little bit about that, if someone has a follow-up question, then sure, that is a green light statement. But if you are in a setting in which it would just be completely inappropriate to talk about your foster care life, either because you personally haven't processed the emotions, or it would just be sort of an awkward situation to do it in, then that might toe on the line of yellow and red. Okay, so how about this one? I have a foster sister, and her name is Janelle. Is that a green, yellow, or red light? So again, if you wouldn't mind popping that in your comments box. Is that a green, a yellow, or a red? Okay. This one's a little trickier, right? I see people having a little bit more trouble with this one. I think generally people are saying that this is a yellow. And I agree on that one. I agree on that one. That generally this is a yellow, because we don't know whether we've gotten Janelle's permission to say that we're allowed to identify her as our foster sister. So a little side note: strategic sharing was developed once upon a time in cooperation with a lady who had no idea that her story would be picked up sort of by, or rather her story, and by extension her sister's story, would be picked up by the news media. And it was, and her sister, still at college, was horrified when all of her friends at college found out, and consequently that broke up their relationship for years. And she had no idea that she was doing anything wrong by sharing her sister's story, but she was. Because anytime that when you talk about somebody else, you're also bringing them into that story. So that's why I say this is yellow, because it really does depend on whether that person that you're bringing into the story is comfortable. So this might be a situation where you have to where you have to ask permission in advance, where you have to talk about that in advance. So how about this one? Cheese is my friend. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Cheese is my friend. Is that a green, yellow, or red light? If you wouldn't mind typing that again into your comments box. Cheese is my friend. We have some very excited people about cheese. Cheese the food. Correct. Cheese is my friend, everyone. We have some people that don't like cheese. Angry about the cheese. Some of us are angry about the cheese. Okay. Okay, so for the most part, this was an either or. People were like, yeah, cheese, whatever, that's cool. Or people were like, that's awkward, and why would you ever bring that up? And some of you say, well, it totally depends on the context. If I'm in a cheese festival, then of course I'm going to be talking about cheese. So this one's tricky because there's a lot at play going on here. So really, if you are at a cheese festival, awesome, that's totally a green light, go for it. However, if you're sitting at a table and cheese is not the topic, and just out of nowhere you're with a bunch of adults and you're trying to get them to take you seriously, like you're doing like a group interview or something, or you're talking to policymakers, and all of a sudden you're like, cheese is my friend. Well, right away that's not gonna hurt you, and it's not like super detrimental, but what I will say about it is that it's awkward. It's awkward. And so awkward statements like that aren't strategic. And so that's why I would place this in the yellow category, depending on where you are, of course. I would put this in the yellow, kind of bordering on red, because this is not how you get people to take you seriously, by making awkward statements. All right, so how about this one? This is the final example that we'll choose. My mom used to do meth every day, but she's doing a lot better. Is that a red, yellow, or green light? If you wouldn't mind typing into your comments box. Again, the statement is, my mom used to do meth every day, but she's doing a lot better. Is that a red, yellow, or green light? All right, so less conflict on this one. I see a lot of yellows. A lot of yellows and a few bordering on red, a few red. So this one, again, is really another depends. Yeah, so if that's something that you're truly proud of and something that you're willing to entertain follow-up questions about, then sure, I would place that in the yellow category, because then the only consideration that you really have to make is, what audience are you sharing this with? Are you at a job interview? Are you talking to people in a context where this would just be, again, really awkward to bring up? But if it's something that you are truly proud of, and something that you're very much able to speak about without breaking down and recounting all the gory details of your childhood and how the your mom's meth problem impacted you, and taking the conversation that way, then I would place it in the red in that instance. But otherwise, I think that this one, again, really, it depends. So I would put this one in the yellow. Okay. So now we're going to talk about my favorite part of this whole chess game, this whole strategic sharing, and that is when you get in trouble, when you get into a sort of tricky situation in a conversation, how do you get out? What's your escape hatch? All right, so the first and easiest one to use is it's called generalization. It's about you making your particular story, your one individual personal story, about all foster youth and all youth in foster care. It's about you telling everyone that you're just a tiny drop in a big giant pond, and that your story represents all youth in care. So when questions become too personal, your first and best line of defense, again, will probably be to talk about how your story is just one example of the whole foster care system. So, for example, if someone asks you how it felt the first time that you were separated from your siblings, feel free to take a step back and think about how all young people in that experience must feel, and then answer. Something like, there are a lot of young people that struggle with the issue of being separated from their siblings every day. They feel betrayed by adults around them, abandoned by their family, and they feel lonely. Do you see what I did there? I redirected the question and took some of the heat off of me, and I put it on to all young people in foster care, because it's easier to think about all of us together as a whole than just me going through it alone. All right, so the next escape hatch is it's got a small typo on there, but it should say reject the question. So instead of to, it should say the. So reject the question. So how did you a typical question that you might get from a reporter or from someone that doesn't know any better, like a Joe Schmo sort of person off the street, is how did you succeed where so many youth in foster care failed? If I were you, my first move in that conversation is not to say, oh, well, I'm just like great and there's something awesome about me. Your first move should be to reject that question, to say, you could do it a couple different ways, to say, I haven't succeeded at anything yet. I'm still working at being great. That's one easy answer. Another easy answer would be, there are a lot of very successful young people out there, and we just don't focus on them. We just don't hear about them. And it's not fair to say that I'm the only one when there are a lot of them out there. So those are examples of rejecting the question entirely. So the next one is this is sort of what politicians do. If you ever watch the news and you hear like sound bites from politicians when they're asked like a really difficult question from a reporter, they'll just answer a different question than the reporter actually asked, and you might find yourself like scratching your head like, oh, I thought we were talking about how you don't support the arts, and now we're talking about your love of reading programs across the state, like that. So that trick, that maneuver that politicians do, that's what I'm advising that you do in a conversation, because it is brilliant. It is really brilliant because it feeds the beast, so to speak. So when people have questions, they want answers, and oftentimes that's all they want. They just want answers. They just want something to think about, to chew on, to write down, to blog about, to whatever. So answer the question that you wish they would have asked. So, for example, if you said in your story that you dealt with a lot of depression and that you attempted to commit suicide, someone might ask, well, how did you try to kill yourself? A better question, the one that they should have asked, is why did you try to do it? Or even better, what were you feeling at the time? That's the question that you should answer, not, what were the specifics of how you tried to kill yourself. The question you should try to answer in that situation is, well, what were you feeling at the time? And you might answer something like, well, I was feeling very alone at the time, and like nothing I did mattered. I was feeling, I was on a bunch of different medications, and it just all became too much. And so, one night I decided to do it, and I'm glad that it didn't work out. And see what I did there? I inserted a little ray of hope into what would otherwise be a depressing question. But really, I answered the question that I wanted to answer, not the question that they did ask. All right, so the next escape hatch. Is that really an important question that you just asked? Is that a question? Is that necessary to the story? What is the benefit of that question? Those are all things that should be floating into your mind no matter what the question is. Even if you agree with the question and know it's a good one right away, you should always sort of in your mind be thinking, is that question important, and how is that question important? And then if after some time you decide that that question isn't important, and by the way, you should feel free to ask whoever's asking you the question, particularly if it's a reporter. You should feel free to ask, well, I'm not sure how that question fits into your story. I thought we were talking about this one thing, and now you're asking me about this. So it's important to clarify at the very least what people are talking about when they ask you questions. And an easy way to do that is just to simply ask, is that how does that question fit? So if you decide that that question doesn't fit what you're trying to display about yourself, what you're trying to display about all young people in foster care, feel free to reject it just out of hand, just to say, I'm not comfortable answering that. That is totally legitimate. Young people in foster care are often trained by adults, even adult supporters who mean very well, to answer all questions all the time, no matter how private or inappropriate they are. Young people in foster care frequently they're just trained to answer them. And so it takes a lot of courage that first time to stand up and just to say, that's not a question I want to answer. I'm just not comfortable answering that question. So I encourage you all to use that tactic as well. I will say on that point though, answering that way doesn't encourage extra conversation. It doesn't encourage follow-up conversation. I would try to use any of the other escape hatches first before saying I'm not comfortable answering that question, because anytime that someone passes you the mic, you should be making a point about yourself, about foster care, about the successes that you have, all those things. You should be making a point no matter what the question is, good or bad. But if people keep prying and keep wanting to know more about the suicide attempt, or keep wanting to know more about the sibling separations and how often you cried and blah, 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 it's fine to say, I'm just not comfortable answering that. Okay. Now, the most important thing about strategic sharing is practice. You must practice it. You must practice it. Conversation and storytelling, those things are an art form. You must practice to get better at it. Try writing out what you have to say first and then saying it out loud. Try having a simple conversation with a supportive person that knows you and knows all about you. Try getting a feel for how long it will take you to say whatever it is that you have to say. However you do it, you have to practice your story. And so with that said, strategic sharing really is it's really just one thing that Foster Club does, but it's the starting place for all of our young leaders. Hence, that's why you're learning about it today. Once you've mastered this, we have about 1 million other great things that you can get involved with. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Ryan, who's going to tell you about several of those 1 million things.
Well, thank you, Tim, for walking us through strategic sharing. That is a fun one, and it's one I've been through several times now at Foster Club, and it's kind of our 101, one of the first workshops we like to put people through because it is so important and it is something that you do continue to practice. But we have a whole wealth of those workshops. A lot of those are listed on our website. Some of them are available for freely distributed, and not just the workshops, but we have other young leader programs. We're at the young leader programs. We have many things I'm going to go over. The young leader programs, the youth conferences, publications, our website, policy work, projects. But to start off with here, that Outstanding Young Leaders is not our only young leader program. We also have the All-Stars. We have the National Foster Care Youth and Alumni Policy Council that is actually going to be gathering in Seattle later this week and through the weekend. We have several past All-Stars, as well as Tim is going to be up there for that. We have Young Adult Training and Technical Assistance, the YADA Network, and the California Scholars, core leadership teams, and the list continues to expand. But right now, that is kind of a good chunk of our work goes into these young leader programs. So, and with those programs, we have the conferences. We like to take our young leaders and have them lead the conferences. There's no better advocate out there, way to teach foster youth, what they should expect and how to excel than from other youth in care who have excelled themselves. So that's our youth conferences. Our publications started off, we have the coloring book there, but a lot of this is really geared more towards older youth in care, the Getting Solid, Permanency Pact, Quick Start Guide, so you know what to expect, and then the Transition Toolkit that's really been picked up by a lot of DHS offices in different states. They're actually asking us to customize that for them. So the Transition Toolkit, these are all things you can go to our website and take a look at. There's a lot of information in each one of those, and we do print them and send them out across the country as well. The website, many of you should be familiar with. We are live with the Outstanding Young Leader pages now. So you are on there. We have not put the link on the front page yet, but that is coming very soon. But you can do a search and go in there for 2013 Outstanding Young Leaders. And we just made it live. We just haven't added it to the either Built for Youth, Powered by Youth, or Changing Life in Foster Care tabs yet, but that is coming. And then aside from the website, the policy work that I mentioned earlier, Timothy is highly involved in, and that really is, it's not as fun for me personally. I know the other people in the office love it, but conferences are way more fun than going and speaking to politicians and practicing your strategic sharing, but we do a lot of that, and it is very necessary, and we get a lot done there. And then our special projects. I mentioned a project called It's Complicated earlier. Natasha Santos is spearheading that, and really it's all about sexuality, relationships for young people in care. The way that youth in care oftentimes learn how to have relationships doesn't always translate to success once you get out there and you're trying to practice the healthy relationship end of things. There's also a lot of LGBTQ aspects of the It's Complicated campaign, but really it's a kind of a holistic approach, and there's a lot to that, hence the name It's Complicated. So now we are going to, that's kind of a bigger briefing on what Foster Club is all about and all of our other programs, and we're going to go to Natasha. She's going to speak more about future initiatives, materials, and everything else. So, Natasha, I believe your mic is now unmuted. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm right here, Ryan. Thank you so much for that great introduction. How's it going, everybody? Okay, yeah, I'll pretend like you were saying it's great. As Ryan was beginning to talk about the Young Adult Training and Technical Assistant Network, we do that in partnership with NRCYD, which stands for the National Resource Center for Youth Development. And there are several resource centers. This resource center focuses around youth development, particularly with youth who are child welfare involved. So that's foster care, juvenile justice, all that good stuff. The YADA network is Young Adults Training and Technical Assistance Network, and they're young people between the ages of 18 and 24 who provide training and technical assistance. Right now, they're doing a lot of work around NYTD, which is the National Youth and Transition Database. They're helping, they're going to states and helping them set things up, speak to some of the youth and also some of the legislators and some of the child welfare professionals about why it's important and how to go about getting the most feedback from youth, or the highest rate of completed surveys. It's really important, that survey. They also provide technical assistance pretty much just on anything that is youth related. We're still for the nothing about us without us philosophy. So yeah, they do a really good job with that. Next slide, please. we also have resources and materials for you guys. We know that we're asking a lot of you. We're really, when we selected you, we were really impressed, like we said, about all the hard work and dedication you guys put into leadership and commitment to advocacy. And we want to be a resource to you too. We have a lot of materials for strategic sharing, like we just talked about, youth engagement, public speaking, leadership, and we'll be giving it out to you through email, through the online Facebook group, and many different ways throughout the year, throughout the coming months. Next slide, please. Question, and please type the answer really quickly into the question box. What are some organizations that you guys are connected to? We've talked so much about Foster Club and what the Outstanding Young Leaders are. I want to know what organizations you guys are connected to. So type that really quickly. Unfortunately, we won't have time to go over it today, but next slide. In the coming weeks or coming week, you guys should get an invitation from me to join our Facebook group. And that's where we'll talk about networking, where we'll talk about organizations, where we'll talk about support and resources that we have for you. And it's also a really cool way to keep in contact with each other and be a support to each other, and get down on all the juicy gossip of what's happening with the OILs and all that good stuff. If you haven't already, like our Facebook page, Foster Club's Facebook page, because we are very likable and it's a really cool page. And like I said, I'll be sending you an invite to join the private 2013 Outstanding Young Leaders group on Facebook. If there's any questions you guys have about any of that stuff, feel free to email me. My email address is Natasha, Natasha, @fosterclub.com. Next slide, please. And that concludes it from me. But if you have any questions, feel free to ask. Thanks, you guys.
So now we are coming to the end of our webinar. We hope we've provided you with an overview about what you can expect from us, from Foster Club, for Outstanding Young Leaders. But at this point, we can open up to any questions or comments anyone might have. There's two ways that you can ask a question. One is you can raise your hand. There's a little hand, there should be a little hand icon that you can press. And I'll see that you've raised your hand, and I can unmute your mic. Even if you just want to give a shout out to other people on the webinar, that would be fine too. Or you can type your question into the question box and we'll read it out loud to the group. So any questions? All right, we had one question from one of the young leaders that asked, who submitted our bios? Great question. The nominations for Outstanding Young Leaders happened in lots of different ways. Some people were self-nominated, so they were submitted by the young person themselves. In some cases, the nomination was made by somebody else, usually a supportive adult, like a caseworker or foster parent or independent living coordinator. And in some cases, staff actually submitted, Foster Club staff submitted your nomination because your application for the All-Star program impressed us, or we've seen your work someplace else. And so you had a staff submitted nomination. From the nomination materials, the bios were written. Each of you can edit your bios. If you're interested, I see Marissa has a question about editing bios. So you are free to send us changes if you'd like for your bio. We want to have them right. We want you to be proud with what it said. And sometimes the supportive adult who maybe nominated you got some of the facts slightly wrong. So go ahead and email your edited or your edits to Ryan@fosterclub.com. And we're happy to do that for you. We also really want to know, we are going to try to stay on top of the press that any of you receive, and add a link to whatever newspaper, or if it's a video cast or a website that cites your award, we'll add that link to your page on Foster Club. So be sure to send any information like that to Ryan also, so that he can update your pages. And I hope I answered those questions sufficiently. And I think that answers the questions we have. It doesn't look like we have a lot of questions. If you think of anything after the webinar, feel free to shoot an email to Ryan at Foster Club, or you can call our office at 503-717-1552. And we do hope this is the beginning of a conversation. We already know many of you online, so good to see you here. But we hope that this is a conversation that will continue over the next year. And we look forward to seeing you on Facebook and possibly at live events in the future. Thank you all for joining, and good night from Foster Club.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.